All right, Web 101. This time around, I took the bare bones amount of mobile test, which remember was just a box one class that I had defined, and just a couple of style elements, essentially just the background color and the width. And using those media queries, what we were able to do was, as the size of our viewport was changing, the color of that box would go from aqua to dark red to black, and the size of that box would go from 40% to 60% or 80% to 100%. So the media query is the action undertaken by the browser in order to determine how wide the viewport is, and then based on how wide the viewport is, to then go through and here with these media queries at media only ... and based on the new descriptions of those selectors to change the way that the page is displayed. So this time around, I've just added a couple of more noodles worth of stuff in here. I'll walk you through them just really quickly so that you can still see the impact that the media queries has based on the size of the page. So first and foremost, I just went ahead and I grabbed a couple of fonts to throw in here so that you could really see the difference as I was playing with the viewport size. So just in full disclosure, I grabbed Babylonica and Roboto. One is the one you can see right now, is a fancy font. Roboto is the -1 default for Android, so it's really easy to read, honestly, and it does not look anything as fancy as the Babylonica does there. So the changes that I made here are as follows. First and foremost, you can see I pasted those two links for the Google Font API right there. So you can see that on lines 4, 5, and 6. The next changes I made are right here in the media queries as we get smaller. So first and foremost, I did also add a little bit of text here and a header and an H1. Really, all I did was copy. It was 8.7 in your case or your student files folder. I just copied index.html's header and H1, and I pasted those in here. So this time around, I also have a header up here in my style section, and that's what's giving me this lovely little buoy as the background. And I'm doing what you saw in 8.7 with a flex box there. So display flex, justifying my content center. You can see that is happening here. Minimum height, 25% of the vertical height there. So this is 100% what happened, copy and pasted from 8.7. So we have added the following changes to our smaller media queries. So instead of Babylonica and 5 EM for our font size in our desktop media query. So remember, that's the standard and implied one. So I don't have a real media query that you can see. It's just implied that that's the desktop media query. In my tablet media query, the 64 EM that you see here, I have still maintained that the dark red is the background for my box, 80% for the width, so it grows. Actually, here it does not grow because I changed that, so I'll change this to 40% again, so you can see that. There we go. So I have an 80% width there. I haven't touched the height. I haven't touched the margins. And if I'm not changing any one of these properties in my smaller media queries, so the height 400 is actually changed. That's a little shorter, but the margin stays auto. I can actually get rid of this line because if I'm not changing the description any, I don't need to repeat it there. So I'm only going to have to add here the background color because I'm changing it to dark red, the width because I'm increasing it from 40% to 80%, and the height because I'm decreasing it from 600 pixels to 400 pixels. So next, I'm going to change in my H1, which you can see right down here on line 59. My H1 is going to go from 5 EM, so very, very large, to 3 EM. I think. Nope, 1.75 EM. I changed that a little bit. 1.75 EM so that it's smaller, and you will see that the impact of that is that number one, it's smaller, and number two, the font face is going to change from Babylonica to Roboto. And the very last thing I've changed is here in my 37EM media query, that header is not going to be displayed. So we should see that buoy and all of our text disappears. This is handy with the smartphone media query because let's say, for example, you have a hover over media gallery. So you've got a carousel or some piece of JavaScript in there that's managing images for you. Is there anything that you can do to hover over in a smartphone? Not really. I mean, there's maybe a couple of smartphones that allow you to do it, but not all of them. So we don't even need to show that gallery there. So we don't have to. I can simply use this property display and say none. It disappears. So first and foremost, we have our desktop media query, just as seen here. No matter how big that content gets, we still have that aqua blue background because this is maintaining the size of a desktop browser, whatever that means. As my viewport shrinks, like it did the last time, so there it goes. Here, a couple of pixels different, and boom, this changes to my tablet media query. You can see in my tablet media query, background color, dark red, width 80%, so it goes from 40% to 80%. And the height, notice the height, I'll change this again, is much shorter this time around. So I'm having a pretty direct impact on the way my web page is being displayed just by using these media queries and allowing the browser to figure out this is my relative size. I'm relatively speaking a desktop. I'm relatively speaking a tablet. I'm relatively speaking a smartphone, and that works really great. And finally, as we get to much smaller, there it is, our smartphone media query, you'll notice that header is no longer displayed there. The buoy, this is to show media queries text, gone, because that display none is my change that I made there in my smartphone media query. So using what we've seen in the chapter so far, using the idea of our flex capacity, using flex to change or to maintain rather the size of our elements, so our container classes inside. That gives us a lot of power over how our web page is going to be seen. Even more power is using this media query, because now what we get to do is say we can change the rules entirely with just a few lines of code that have an impact on how our user sees a web page based on the type of the device that they're on. These media queries are, and it's entirely crazy to me that essentially one of the biggest deals in all of web design almost ever. I mean, sure, the fact that we have the web is even bigger, but really the way that we appreciate websites now is all because we have this idea of the media query, and it's fantastic.